Hey YouTube, Skippy7399 here. Said I was going to do a soldering video for you. Here we are tonight, going to do that soldering video. We're going to do 3 different connectors tonight. I'm going to do a Traxxas connector, which sometimes can be difficult. I'm going to do a Dean's connector, which can be kind of confusing. I guess I should be showing you these here. Here's the Dean's connector. We're going to do a male Traxxas. I will show you the difference between the males and the female Traxxas, because there is a difference, even though I'm not going to solder a female Traxxas. There is a slight difference that you have to look for so you know which connector you are getting onto the wire. And of course, the male end is always going to go on your speed controls or your chargers. Female end always goes on the battery. And then of course, like I said, here is the EC3. We'll be doing that one as well. Now I am reusing an EC3 connector, and I am reusing the Dean's. The Traxxas one will be a new, but I'm just going to make a charge lead using it. The soldering principles are the same no matter what connector you're using. First things first, make sure you have a good quality soldering iron. This is a track power set to about 750. We actually use a spade tip iron here at the store. Make sure your sponge is nice and wet. It doesn't have to be soaking wet, but wet, just so you can take the tip and clean the tip off if you need. And of course, we have a cabinet here for flicking solder. Just something to keep in mind. Alright, so let's get going here. We'll do these last. We'll do the Traxxas first. Now, this is the terminal end for the Traxxas. And you can see right there on the terminal it says wire side. Don't know how well this is going to show up. It may not show up at all. Too much light. Okay, it says wire side right there. And then right there where my fingernail is a little line. You don't want solder to go beyond that line, because the connector actually has to snap in using these tiny little tabs on the sides. And again, this is for the male connector. And like I said, there is a difference between that one. This is the one for the female connector, and I don't know if you can see this real well. This one has kind of rounded sides. This one has very square sides. This one obviously is for the male connector. The rounded one is for the female connector. If you try to put this one into a male Traxxas connector, it's going to be very, very difficult to put in, if you can get it in at all. So, be aware of that when you're doing your soldering. Move this out of the way. First things first, let's get this one tinned up. We'll show you how to do that. We use very fine resin core solder. You can see how small this stuff is. And of course, my soldering iron is good and hot. Now, the key to doing this correctly, when you apply the solder or apply the heat, is actually to push down. I'm physically pushing down on the plug to make sure I get enough heat in there to actually melt the solder. And I'm just going to melt about that much. That's perfect. You can see it's just barely up to that line where I don't want it to go any further. Here's my second connector. Again, I am pushing down, making sure I get plenty of heat in there. And you can put the wire on there whenever you want, just to hold it there. And you'll see when it starts to melt. That's probably fine. There you go, that's plenty of solder. Any more than that, and you're probably just going to mess up the wiring to the point where it's not usable. Alright, we have this handy dandy little wire stripper here. We're going to use this just to pull, and it's not going to work for me tonight, is it? Just to pull a little bit of wire exposed like that. You don't want much more than that. You don't need more wire than that little tab on the connector is long. Any more than that, it's going to end up sticking out of the back side of the plug and be exposed, and you don't want that. Another handy little tool, standard pair of pliers, rubber bands on the handle will hold just about anything, and in this case I want it to hold my piece of wire so I can tin my wire. And all I'm going to do here is, I have way too much stuff in my way here, apply my heat and a little bit of solder, and I want to add enough solder to this that the entire connector is covered in solder. You know, you don't want any exposed wire on this side. And you can see there I just barely touched it and it started to melt right away. That means the entire wire is covered in solder. So that's the positive. Let's get the negative set up here. And we're going to do the same thing. Nice hot iron. Hold it on the wire, add a little bit of solder, and you can see it just suck the solder in, and that's exactly what you want. In fact, I have too much. You can tell when you have too much because now I've got solder on the tip. So I'm just going to clean that off again real quick. Now if you do this correctly, you can actually, I've seen people use, and we do it here once in a while, use a pair of straight edge plier, or a straight edge screwdriver to push the connector together. You can do that if you want. You don't, if you do it correctly, you actually don't need to do that. Now these are both tinned. All we're going to do is hold this on here. I'm pushing down to get the heat. You see the solder melt. Take the heat away, and as soon as you see it gray over like that, and it kind of looks like a hazy solder again, you're done with that one. Take the other connector, just barely add a little bit of heat. You see the solder melt right away. Wait for the solder in the connector to melt. Take the heat away. You see it gray over. And I'm going to take these and I'm going to go to my sponge. I'm going to cool them off a little bit because I need to be able to handle them. So here's our two wires, our male and our female, or negative. That didn't make any sense. Negative and positive, sorry. And of course on Traxxas connectors it's marked negative, positive. So we're just going to take this wire side to the top, slide it in all the way till it gets to like that point. Take our positive lead, slide that in, and you can see them both sticking out just barely like that. But, and this is the other key, when you look at this side, notice they're not all the way to the bottom. You can tell when they're not set correctly, or if someone has too much solder on the top of the connector, it won't poke all the way through. So this, just a piece of wood with a channel cut in it. Let that sit there. I got to grab my screwdriver real quick. All right. Got a small flat-bladed screwdriver, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to let the piece of wood hold it. Push in till it snaps. You hear it snap. Good positive connection. This one, good positive connection. And now when you look at this side, both the terminals are all the way to the ends, or almost all the way to the ends. It's nice and strong. I mean, you are not going to pull that off of there. It is on there good and strong. That is a good solder joint. And this is what you want it to look like. It should be clean on this side with the terminals almost all the way to the end. And on this side, you don't see any solder sticking out back here, and there's no exposed wire. So that's exactly what you want. Now we'll go to this end. I got to strip these two ends here, flip my block over, And on this end, what the heck? Let's put the Deans on here. Actually, no. Let's put the EC3 on here, and we'll put the Deans on the charge lead. We'll just make an adapter out of this one. So I gotta cut my wires to make them the same length. Make that pretty easy cut. Use my wire stripper, and I'm gonna see if I can't get both of these to strip at the same time. Yeah, more or less. A little bit sticking on there, but that's probably good. All we need is just a little bit of wire. Twist it, make it nice and clean. Actually, I do need more wire than that if I'm going to do the EC3, because I want to make the Deans a charge connector. My poor wire stripper here has been around the block so many times, and of course, it's not meant for heavy gauge household wiring. And the first thing I do, I come in one day and my boss is using it to clean, or try to clean off ballast wiring for our overhead lighting, and I just like, it's not meant for that, right? He's like, oh, I thought it didn't look like it worked very well. Okay, I'd use my razor blade real quick. These two ends now stripped back. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want something at least halfway decent. Use our pair of pliers again, because we need to tin these. And you always, I see a lot of people that don't tin the wires or the connectors, and you really do need to tin both of them for a good connection. And again, a good hot soldering iron is going to be your lifesaver if you start doing a lot of soldering. And like with anything else, it's practice. All right, got those tinned. And like I said, I'm reusing the EC3 connectors, so you might see a little bit of solder in there. That's not necessarily a big deal. What you're going to do is basically all the same principle. You're going to take your soldering iron, a little slag on there, just hold it to the edge. And anytime you need to melt old solder, here's a little trick. Add new solder, and look at that, right away it melts. Take your connector, or your wire end, set that in there, take the heat away, wait for a few seconds, maybe you have to blow on it a little bit, and there you see it gray over. Connection done. Here's the other one. Again, old solder, apply some heat, add some new solder, and it melts. Put your wire in there, take the heat away, wait for a second or two, wait for it to gray over, and you're done. Very simple. The biggest thing, like I said, is waiting for it to gray over. That lets you know you have a good connection. I'm just dipping those in the water so I can actually touch them. Alright, again, like any other connector, they're marked with a positive and a negative. So positive in there, negative in there. And these have to be pushed in with a screwdriver as well. But because I don't have a slot in the board to hold it, what we're going to do is use my pliers with the rubber band on the end. Take your screwdriver, push down, nice good positive connection, push down, nice good positive connection, pull it off, and there you go. No exposed wire, terminals are all the way to the ends, and just like the Traxxas on the other end here, I can show you, I am pulling really hard and it's not coming apart. So that, those ends, good strong connection. I just realized I put a female on here. No, that's a good charge lead. Yeah, okay, that'll work. So that's EC3s, Traxxas. Let's move on to the Deans. Didn't realize this video was going to be this long. I apologize. but it is what it is. Trying to get a lot of information into a short video here. Probably knew this was going to be a little on the long side. I need to trim this because it's not very good. Right. Try my stripper again. Well, I got the positive one to do again, and the negative one worked really well, and it didn't work at all that time. So back to the razor blade. Trim it with the razor blade. All right. That should be fine. That's all we really need. And then the negative on this side. All right. So, Dean's connectors. Like I said, I'm reusing a previously used Dean's connector. Something else to keep in mind, if I can find it here. There it is. Not all Dean's connectors are created equal. These some of these that aren't actually from Dean's but look like Dean's connectors, and you can tell because they've got this lighter red color, whereas an actual Dean's color is this dark red. Dean's connectors, an actual Dean's connector will take quite a bit of heat before the plastic starts to deform. These won't, but I'm going to use this anyway as a heat sink. By plugging them in together, now when I solder on this end, I know I'm not going to deform the plastic no matter how much heat I have to add in there. It will always come apart nicely. And this is actually probably more beneficial for anybody that uses like 30-watt soldering irons. I really don't like 30 watt. I recommend something at least 60 watt, maybe even a track power system like I'm using here today would be a better unit or a better idea for soldering. So we're going to take our pair of pliers with the rubber bands on the end, lay that in there nicely, make sure you've got this on here, and this is something else that a lot of people get confused on when you're looking at a Dean's connector, and it doesn't really matter which way you hold it. The one, if you look at like an airplane tail, this would be your horizontal stabilizer, this is your vertical stabilizer. Horizontal is positive, vertical is negative. It'll always be that way. So this is always going to be your positive, this is always going to be your negative. I don't know why, but I like to do the positives first. And something else to keep in mind while I am grabbing some heat shrink, when you do batteries, a lot of these same ideas for soldering apply to soldering batteries. But please remember, when you solder LiPo batteries, only do one connection at a time. I have seen people cut both leads, positive and negative, and do their soldering, and it's not a good idea. If that battery dead shorts against itself, you've just wasted a battery. So you don't want that. Makes for a good light show, but you definitely don't want that. Alright, so what I did, got myself a couple of small pieces of heat shrink. Just put those over the end of the wire, positive and negative. Alright, those can sit anywhere you want. Now we need to tin our connectors. So we're going to take our solder. And this will be a little quicker because this is a used connection that already has some solder on it. So keep that in mind. Add a little bit of heat, a little bit of solder, and you see it pool up right away. We're going to give it quite a bit. So it's got a nice big glob of solder on there. That's perfect. Open up the pliers. Be careful not to touch the connector because I have done that before and they are hot. Alright, now we'll do the negative, a little bit of heat, and it's already going to take the solder pretty quickly. There we go. Nice little amount of solder. That's perfect. Now I can take this out and kind of set it to the side because I need to tin my wires. So take our wires, put those in the pair of pliers. Let me get the things moved here so you can see what I'm doing. Alright. And we're going to tin these wires. Again, a little bit of heat, just like we did before. A little bit of solder. Wait for the solder to completely cover the wire. And the way you can tell you've got enough solder on there is right now, I don't know how well this is showing up on camera, probably not well at all, but it doesn't look like wire anymore. It looks like one solid piece of tin. All the strands of wire are completely enveloped in solder. So you know you've got enough on there. Like I said, you don't want anything exposed on any one of the sides. So there's your negative, there's your positive, that's done. We are done with the soldering wire, so we can actually set that aside. And we're going to bring our connector back in. Set that here. Actually, we do it that way. Let's start with the positive again, like I always do. And, sorry, I'm right-handed. This is going to screw me up. I got to go this way. All right. So now we have our wire and our soldering iron. I'm going to come in from the side. You can see it a little bit better. Hold it on there. As soon as the solder on the plug starts to melt, take the heat away, wait for it to gray over, and there you go. You can see it's already connected. Now we'll turn it and do our negative. Try to come in from the side again so you can see it. Adding the heat. Now solder on the wire melts first. Solder on the connector melts. As soon as the solder on the connector fully melts, take the heat away, let it gray over, and we're connected. And like I said, it's kind of nice because this second plug works as a heat sink, so I can pull it right out. Take that out of the way. I'm going to go over here and cool it off a little bit because I don't need it very hot because I'm going to be touching this. So now that that's done, you take your heat shrink, move it all the way down to the bottom. Now you can actually heat this on or shrink it down a number of different ways. I've seen guys use lighters. You can actually use the soldering iron too. I've seen, and I've done this before, where you take the soldering iron and you very carefully apply a little bit of heat, and you can actually see the shrink wrap start to shrink down to the size of the connector underneath, and that works. You know, in a pinch, if you need to, it works. I like the heat gun just because the heat gun is fast. You get it turned on, make sure your wire stays at the very end, shrink it down. And done. So now you have a good strong Dean's connector. You have a good strong EC3 and a good strong Traxxas connector. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you learned something. Please like, comment. I'm not going to ask you to subscribe. I'm not like that. But if you do have any questions about soldering, please feel free to ask. I am on YouTube every day. I didn't realize this was going to be a 24-minute video. I apologize, but like I said, I hope it was helpful for somebody out there. And thanks for watching. Thanks you.